Tonight we're floating just above the clouds, not the puffy white ones from plain windows, but those soft golden mists from a thousand-year-old dream. You're lying on a smooth, cool stone floor. Incense curls gently in the air. Nearby, a pair of sandalwood sandals sits neatly beside a towering carved pillar. You blink, and a board appears before you. Not just any board, this one gleams with inlaid lapis and gold, each square etched with tiny symbols. Across from you, reclining like someone who's been winning at divine game nights for millennia, is Vishnu. He smirks, not a threatening smirk, just the kind that says you're about to lose and it'll be adorable to watch. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious where you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You look down at the board. It's familiar, sort of. There's no queen, no bishop. Instead, there's a war elephant balancing on one square and a four-horse chariot on another. One figure, maybe a foot soldier, glances up at you with painted eyes that say, "Yes, I know this is weird, just go with it." You move your first piece. Welcome to the divine version of chess, or if you want to sound impressive, at dinner parties, chaturanga. We're going to untangle the story of how this ancient Indian game evolved, possibly inspired by gods like Vishnu himself, and how it morphed through empires, cultures, and centuries into the chessboard you maybe have stuffed in a closet. But tonight, we start here, in a mythical heaven, where Vishnu lounges his blue fingers casually, spinning a conch shell between moves, because apparently even gods get bored. In Hindu cosmology, Vishnu is the preserver, the second figure in the divine trinity, alongside Brahma, the creator, and Shiva, the destroyer. His job, maintain balance. He's the guy who steps in when things start wobbling, incarnating as Rama Krishna or even a fish, depending on the crisis. But during the quiet eons between cosmic floods and demon apocalypses, what's a deity to do? According to some folktales, Vishnu passed time by creating games of balance, games of movement, games that required thought but also a touch of unpredictability. And wouldn't you know it, chaturanga, with its swirling interplay of four armies, its strategic nuance and its oddly spiritual resonance, fits the brief almost too well. Now, historians don't usually give divine beings credit in peer-reviewed journals. You won't find an academic saying chess was invented by Vishnu, probably sometime after brunch. But stories do circulate, especially in temple regions of South India, where priests tell of celestial games played by bored gods who wanted to see if mortals could match their skill. Spoiler, they couldn't. In some versions, it's not Vishnu directly, but a sage under his patronage, maybe Narada or even Vyasa, who introduces the game to kings as a way to sharpen their minds and discipline their desires. Others say the board itself is symbolic. The 64 squares mirror the Vedic view of the cosmos order imposed over chaos. Each move on the board is a microcosmic reenactment of cosmic preservation. But let's come back to the board. The one you're staring at still has that new game smell, except instead of cardboard and plastic, it smells like sandalwood and star stuff. You roll your shoulders. Vishnu leans in, moving a piece with the kind of elegance that suggests he's played this more times than there are stars in the sky. His opponent, you, no pressure. And just when you think it's all going to make sense, he speaks. Even gods need pattern, he says. Without it, time dissolves. Well, that's one way to explain a hobby. Because chess, like life, like time, is all about pattern. Move and counter-move. Light and dark. Known and unknowable. It's not just a game, it's an idea. And that idea, in India at least, was never just about fun. It was always philosophical, strategic, sometimes even sacred. Now historians still argue whether games like chaturanga were originally for leisure military training or spiritual contemplation. Some say they were modeled after real army formations. Others think they were coded teachings, ways to understand dharma and karma without ever cracking open a scroll. But in this moment on this divine chessboard, none of that matters. All that matters is that you're here playing a game that has echoed across centuries, continents, and empires. And as Vishnu lifts his next piece, a horse-shaped token carved from moonstone, you realize he's letting you win. Or maybe that's just what he wants you to think. Vishnu slides his horse-shaped piece forward with the nonchalance of someone who's mastered infinite games across infinite kalpas. You meanwhile are still trying to remember the rules of modern chess, let alone divine chaturanga. But that's okay. This game was never just about rules. It was about symbolism, of war, of wisdom, and maybe of something deeper, time itself. The earliest physical traces of chaturanga date back to around the 6th century CE in northern India. Picture the Indian subcontinent at that moment, lush, fragrant, chaotic. Dynasties rising and falling like summer monsoons. Monks copying Sanskrit texts in candlelight. Traders ferrying spices, silk, and half-remembered gossip along the Silk Road. And in one of those palaces, a king sits bored. Not in the too much Netflix kind of bored, but in that slow, soul-deep, courtly ennui that comes from having too much power and too little danger. His advisors whisper, perhaps he needs distraction. Or maybe instruction. Enter Chaturanga. The name itself means 4 divisions, representing the 4 branches of an ancient Indian army: infantry, cavalry, elephants, and chariots. Each unit becomes a piece on the board. But unlike modern chess, the original Chaturanga was a 4-player game, yes, 4 complete with dice rolls and alliances that could sour faster than leftover paneer. You think you're frustrated when someone castles early in chess? Try trusting your neighbor in a 4-way war where any alliance is just a temporary prayer. Of course, historians still argue whether the original Chaturanga actually had dice, or whether that was a later embellishment. Some versions appear purely strategic. Others incorporate chance, suggesting the gods weren't the only ones with a hand in the outcome. And while some believe the game was used to teach battlefield tactics to princes' miniature war games for future emperors, others think its real purpose was to simulate life's unpredictability. You can plan everything, align your troops' position perfectly, and still lose because someone rolled a bad 4. Now let's pause for a moment to appreciate the sheer imagination behind this early game. 4 players, 64 squares. Warriors, elephants, horses, chariots. No bishops, no queens. The king, or Raja, is crucial but doesn't do much. Sound familiar? Even the board layout varied. Some used colors to indicate movement limitations. Others painted intricate battlefield scenery beneath the grid. And there are accounts of ceremonial boards made from stone, metal, even ivory, likely for ritualistic or royal use. You sip some tea in your mind because yes, this part of the story calls for quiet tea. Maybe something with cardamom. Now imagine being a traveler from Persia or the Eastern Roman Empire wandering into a Mughal court and watching 4 grown men whisper furiously over a tiny army of carved sandalwood figurines. You'd be confused, maybe fascinated, maybe even hooked, because that's the thing with chess and its ancestors, it pulls people in, not just because it's fun, but because it feels like control. Like understanding, like holding chaos in check, 1 square at a time. There's even a Sanskrit verse from around the 7th century that hints at the game's early cultural reach. It praises a wise man who understands the moves of chariots and horses as one who understands the movement of the world. Fringe interpretations go further, linking Chaturanga to mystical practices. They claim the pieces correspond to elements, earth, air, fire, water, or to the 4 Varnas social classes in Hindu society. These aren't mainstream ideas, mind you, but they do speak to something real: how humans love to layer meaning onto play. It's not enough to move a horse piece. We want that piece to mean something, to reflect our world, our struggles, our questions. So maybe it's no coincidence that Chaturanga emerges in an era of intense philosophical ferment in India. This is the period when Advaita, Vedanta Buddhist logic, and Jain metaphysics are all in full bloom. And while monks debate whether reality is illusion, someone in the next room is quietly sacrificing a chariot in a game that weirdly feels just as profound. Now let's zoom in on a particularly quirky tidbit. In some versions of the game, the elephant moved 2 squares diagonally, but only if the path wasn't blocked. Think about that. An elephant sidestepping like a nervous crab. Imagine trying to teach that rule to a sleepy princeling who keeps asking why he can't just smash everything. Good luck, royal tutor. And yet these odd rules made the game what it was, a blend of logic, culture, and the slightly arbitrary, like life. Back at the divine board, Vishnu yawns theatrically, probably pretending he hasn't just maneuvered you into a losing position. His eyes twinkle. It's not just the pieces he says, it's what they remember. Because every move on the board echoes old campaigns, forgotten duels, lessons from 1,000 dusty scrolls. You're not just playing a game, you're stepping into memory. And even now, as the board remains the same, you start to see it differently. Your chariot is no longer a piece, it's a strategy waiting to unfold. Your infantry, once overlooked, suddenly becomes the key to a clever trap. You see pattern, you see balance, you see time paused on the square waiting. The wind rustles through the banyan trees outside the palace as the game pauses, not because it needs to, but because Vishnu leans back and starts reminiscing. You weren't expecting this. Apparently gods get nostalgic too. Of course, he says, chaturanga didn't stay the same for long. Nothing ever does. You lean in and suddenly you're riding along dusty trade routes, winding through deserts and over mountain passes. The game that once lived in Indian courts and temple libraries begins to stretch its limbs. It reaches west into Persia, where it changes its name and its pieces and its soul. It becomes shatranj. Here's where the board starts to look familiar to modern eyes. Gone are the 4 players, the dice, the alliance-breaking chaos. Shatranj becomes a 2-player duel, simplified, yes, but sharpened. Strategy becomes king. No, literally. The game is now all about protecting the king or Shah. And if you put the Shah in danger, you say, Shahmat, the king is helpless. Sound familiar? Yep, checkmate. And just like that, a game with spiritual and military overtones morphs into something sleeker, something more codified. The elephant becomes the fil or al-fil, a diagonal jumping piece. The chariot becomes a rukh. The vizier appears moving just 1 square at a time, like a careful politician. Historians still debate how these transitions happened. Was it Persian minimalism, cultural misunderstanding? Or did someone just want to make things easier to teach in a smoky tavern between caravan stops? Whatever the reason, shatranj sticks. It becomes popular in Abbasid Baghdad, in Andalusian Spain, in Cairo, Damascus, and Samarkand. Poets write verses about it. Scholars debate its strategies. Some even argue about whether playing it is sinful or wise, a battle between distraction and discipline. Meanwhile, Vishnu raises a divine eyebrow. Let's not forget he mutters that the game was always a little bit of both. Quirky fact time. One Abbasid Caliph al-Mamun reportedly kept a chess-playing grandmaster on retainer like a court jester, but with more diagrams. Imagine being paid just to beat a king at his favorite game, while desperately trying not to win too hard. Also, shatranj finds fans among the elite and the ordinary. It becomes a metaphor machine. You're not just moving pieces, you're enacting fate, love, politics, even fate's betrayal. One medieval poem compares a woman's fickleness to the knight's unpredictable hop. Another calls the board a battlefield of the mind. Chess as life metaphors abound. You meanwhile are trying not to laugh at the idea of romantic betrayal explained with pawn formations. Still, it's better than comparing your breakup to Monopoly. And yes, back to Vishnu, because while humans are busy tweaking rules and carving ivory sets, the gods are watching with amusement. Did Vishnu actually invent chess? No one really knows. But some ancient texts hint at divine origins. There's a Puranic story where Vishnu creates a cosmic game to teach humility to arrogant kings. They grow obsessed with it, losing sleep, sanity, and eventually their thrones, all because they couldn't stop trying to outplay fate. Some fringe interpretations even go wild, suggesting chaturanga was part of a divine cosmogram, a visual metaphor for the universe itself. The king, your soul. The pieces, the forces pulling at you, desire, duty, fear, love. The board, a battlefield of illusion, or Maya. Too much, maybe, but it's kind of poetic, right? Back in Persia, the game keeps evolving. There's evidence of puzzle books' early precursors to today's chess problems. One challenge reads like a riddle white mates in 3, but only if the rook sacrifices itself. Another describes a legendary game played by a blindfolded merchant who claims divine inspiration. The line between genius and mystic gets blurry fast. And here's a detail you didn't expect women played too. Records from early Islamic courts include references to female players, tutors, even champions. One story tells of a noblewoman in Samara who refused marriage proposals unless her suitor could defeat her in 3 matches. Spoiler, she remained single for a long time. You imagine her now, eyes calm, fingers poised, smiling faintly, as yet another disappointed lord flips the board in frustration. Legend. Eventually, as the game spreads through Europe, thanks in part to the Crusades, it sheds even more of its Eastern roots. But before that happens, Shatranj lives a full, vibrant life in the Islamic Golden Age. Manuscripts show stunning illustrations of the board with gold ink and geometric flair. Pieces take on regional personalities, some abstract, others animal-shaped. In Egypt, you find falcon-headed knights. In Baghdad, glossy onyx elephants. Even the way players sit matters. Some squat, cross-legged on floor cushions. Others lean dramatically across tiny inlaid tables. And always the air is thick with spices, poetry, and quiet calculation. One chronicler writes, "The measure of a man is not how he fights with swords, but how he sacrifices his horse to save his king." You chuckle, horse sacrifices again. So here's what you've got so far, a 4-player Indian battlefield morphing into a Persian duel of minds, a god who might have invented it out of boredom, and a trail of beautiful, brainy, sometimes bizarre adaptations stretching across centuries and continents. And somehow you're still losing to Vishnu. He sips from a coconut shell, probably just to flex. You adjust your metaphorical turban and squint at the board, because even if you don't win this round, you're starting to see the game not just as a game, but as a story of movement, of inheritance, of power wrapped in strategy. Vishnu smiles, he's impressed. So are you. The game shifts again. You barely notice at first, maybe it's the pieces moving slightly differently or the board getting narrower. But as the scent of jasmine fades and the Persian lamps flicker out, you're swept into another era, medieval Europe. Chess has packed its bags and crossed the borders. You're in a stone hall now, a cold one, candles sputter. A monk with ink-stained fingers stares at the board like it's a riddle from God himself, which for a lot of folks in 11th century Europe it kind of is. But let's rewind. How did Shatranj make its way into Europe? Blame or thank the Moors? When Islamic armies entered Spain in the early 8th century, they brought science, poetry, architecture, and chess. The game took root in Al-Andalus, where Christian, Muslim, and Jewish scholars occasionally sat at the same tables, translating texts, sharing ideas, and yes, occasionally playing best of 3. From there, chess travels north, to France, to Germany, even to Viking longships. Yes, a chess piece carved from walrus ivory was found on the Isle of Lewis, because of course the Vikings turned their raids into board games. Historians still argue whether chess arrived earlier through the Byzantine Empire or later via Spain, but either way it wasn't just passed down, it was transformed. In Europe, the pieces begin their evolution again. The vizier, too foreign, too exotic, becomes the queen. And here's where things get spicy. The queen wasn't always the powerhouse she is today. In early European chess, she could only move 1 square diagonally like a drunk bishop, not exactly the ruler of the board. But over time, some say due to the rising influence of powerful queens like Isabella of Castile, she gained strength. By the 15th century, she's the most dangerous piece on the board. From submissive court ornament to battlefield hurricane in 200 years, a true medieval glow-up. Quirky side note, for a while chess was associated with sin in Europe. Some church leaders believed it encouraged gambling, vanity, and idle chatter. Others worried it resembled war too closely. There's even a 13th century bishop who banned it during Lent. Imagine giving up chess instead of chocolate. Yet, despite the pearl clutching, the game thrived. Nobles had ornate sets carved from crystal and jet. Kings wrote treatises about it. Queens played with their ladies-in-waiting. And in the courtly romances of the time, chess often served as the backdrop for flirtation and secret plotting. Picture it. A knight leans across the board, eyes locked on his opponent, not because of the rook she just moved, but because of the sparkle in her eyes. The game was both competition and code. You peek back at Vishnu, who smirks, told you it was about more than strategy. Here's a fun fact. One of the earliest known European chess books is by a Spanish churchman named Jacobus de Sessolis. Written around 1300, it uses chess to explain moral virtues. The king must be just. The knight must be brave. The pawn a hard-working peasant dreaming of promotion. He even assigns each pawn a medieval profession, blacksmith, tailor, doctor, because nothing screams bedtime moral tale like what your rook says about your work ethic. This is where the metaphors multiply. In medieval Europe, chess becomes an allegory for life, duty, and cosmic order. Some see it as a representation of the great chain of being, everyone in their place, from pawn to king, moving according to divine law. Others just want to win. The boards get fancier. Manuscripts show kings hunched over tables, pieces mid-move, a goblet nearby. One illustration shows death playing chess with a monk. The caption, something like "Checkmate is coming for us all." Subtle. By now you realize chess isn't just surviving, it's thriving by adapting. Every culture reshapes it. Every generation adds meaning. Which brings us to Italy. During the Renaissance, Italians take chess mania to new heights. They formalize rules, publish strategy guides, and even host public exhibitions. One Florentine noble hosts a wedding feast where each course is themed after a chess piece. The roast swan, symbolizing the queen's grace. The boar's head, the knight's brute courage. You're not sure if that's genius or just very expensive cosplay, but hey, commitment. Meanwhile, professional players emerge. Chess becomes a courtly art, a sign of intelligence, a way to display power without shedding blood. Think of it as a non-lethal duel that still lets you say, "I crushed him." But here's where things get weird. Remember how the queen leveled up. Some scholars suggest the new queen rules the diagonal steamroll, the long-range kill, were introduced to make games faster. Because noblemen were getting bored. Yep. The most iconic piece in chess history may have been juiced up to reduce lunch break game time. There's also a theory that the Pope's influence led to downplaying Islamic origins. It's a Roman game now, they'd say, while nervously hiding the Persian elephant-shaped pieces under a pew. Still, some elements stick around. Bishops, for example, stay diagonal because in early Europe they're sometimes called fools or jesters. The idea of zigzagging mischief tracks. And knights, forever the wild card. In Italy, a popular tactic emerges: the knight's fork. You move it into a position that attacks two valuable pieces at once, forcing your opponent to choose what to save. It's sneaky, it's clever, it's brutal. In other words, it's very Italian. You start to see how chess, like a trickster god or a half-forgotten myth, reinvents itself in each place it lands. It's not just Vishnu's game anymore, it's a shapeshifter. And you're starting to feel like one of those pawns Jacobus wrote about, stumbling across the board, hoping to survive long enough for promotion. At least your in-game salary is good. You're still lingering in Italy when the Renaissance sun fades and a different light takes its place, the cold glow of Enlightenment reason. The scent of rosewater gives way to the faint must of old libraries and ink pots. You can almost hear powdered wigs being adjusted in the distance. Chess, like everything else in Europe, is about to be rethought, remeasured, and rationalized. It's the age of reason, and no game is safe. Suddenly you're in an 18th century Parisian salon surrounded by porcelain teacups, powdered nobles, and one of history's most curious chess players, François-André Danicant Philidor. He's not just a musician, he's a grandmaster, a dual-class bard-rook hybrid, if you will. Philidor's most famous line pawns are the soul of chess, which is adorable until you realize it's also terrifying. Because pawns, once background extras in this drama, now become the centerpiece of Enlightenment chess strategy. The French love a good theory, and Philidor obliges. He writes a treatise in 1749, yes, a full book on chess theory. In it, he emphasizes planning patience and pawn structure. Not exactly what Vishnu had in mind while chilling on a serpent, but impressive nonetheless. It becomes clear chess is no longer just a courtly pastime. It's now a battleground of the intellect. The Enlightenment loves this. Strategy, logic. The idea that if you study hard enough, read enough books, and squint hard enough at your opponent's brow furrow, you can outthink anyone. Historians still argue whether this rational turn in chess came from the Enlightenment itself or was already bubbling up through decades of gameplay. But either way, the change is undeniable. Even Napoleon gets in on the game badly. Rumor has it he loved chess but was mediocre at best. Some historians say he'd flip the board if he was losing. You're not sure that's true, but you're very sure he seems like the kind of guy who'd do that. Meanwhile, in England, coffee houses become unofficial chess clubs. Imagine a smoky room, wooden tables, sticky with spilled porter, and men in top hats arguing over the Sicilian defense. The best part? These weren't noblemen anymore. Middle-class men could now play too. Chess was democratizing, slowly, awkwardly, but still. And it's around this time that the first official chess clocks show up. Before this, games could stretch on forever. Like bring a sleeping bag forever. The chess clock changes everything. No more dithering for 20 minutes over your bishop. Now tick, tick, tick. Fringe fact. The first known chess-playing automaton appears in the late 18th century, the Turk, a wooden figure dressed in robes and a turban seated at a chessboard. He beat humans regularly and even played Benjamin Franklin. Spoiler? The Turk wasn't real. A human hid inside the cabinet. You chuckle. Even in the age of reason, a little stage magic goes a long way. The game also becomes increasingly codified. Rules that once varied between villages now get locked in. The Queen's moves the castling rule en passant, all pinned down like insects in a naturalist's drawer. If chess was myth, once it's now math. By the early 19th century, professional chess clubs and societies sprout across Europe. The first formal chess tournament is held in London in 1851, and a German immigrant named Wilhelm Steinitz, quiet, analytical, slightly snarky, starts developing what becomes the modern positional game. Steinitz's philosophy: don't attack unless you've got a good reason. Build up your position, defend well, and wait for your opponent to overreach. It's basically strategic trolling. But not everyone likes this new style. Fans of bold romantic chess sacrifices, wild combinations, melodramatic checkmates mock Steinitz. Too boring, they say, too safe. Still, Steinitz keeps winning. Eventually, he becomes the first official world chess champion. The crown has changed heads, from gods to queens to bards to philosophers, and now to a man with sideburns and an obsession with pawn chains. Here's a fun historical morsel. While chess was getting serious in Europe, in China, a completely different version called xiangqi was thriving. With a river down the center of the board and cannons that leap over pieces, it's proof that the chess family is full of weird cousins. Some scholars even argue that xiangqi preserved older forms of Indian chaturanga, like a game of telephone across empires. And speaking of odd chess cousins, ever heard of Jangi? That's Korea's variant with palace zones and no strict grid. It's like someone reimagined chess during a fever dream and then made it even harder. But back in the West, as the 19th century gives way to the 20th, chess continues climbing the ladder of prestige. It becomes a respectable pursuit like fencing or writing slightly boring poetry. Universities host tournaments. Newspapers publish annotated games. The average Londoner might know who Paul Morphy was, even if he couldn't tell you who Vishnu is, which is kind of ironic when you remember where all this began, with a blue-skinned god lounging on a cosmic snake, just looking for a fun way to kill time. Chess has traveled continents, changed languages, swapped queens and kings, lost and regained powers, and yet at its core it's still the same, an abstract little war played out on 64 squares. A thought experiment, a performance, a ritual. You lean in and glance across the board. The other side is preparing something, A trap, maybe, or just a harmless opening. Either way, your next move matters. But then maybe it always did. You blink and now it's the 20th century. Everything smells slightly of steam engines, fresh newsprint, and the sharp acidic twang of early ambition. The air feels like change, more erratic, more rapid. And chess, of course, keeps up. If the Enlightenment gave chess its brain, the modern world is about to give it a personality disorder. Welcome to the rise of chess celebrities, Cold War propaganda, and more drama than a royal court breakup. Your first stop is Havana, Cuba, where a boy named Jose Raul Capablanca is casually dismantling everyone he plays. Born in 1888, he learns chess by watching his father, then beats him at age 4. Yep, 4. That's not parenting, that's trauma. Capablanca's style is smooth, effortless, and deeply unnerving. He doesn't sacrifice pieces for glory, he just positions them perfectly. So perfectly it looks boring until you realize you've already lost, and he's barely broken a sweat. He becomes world champion in 1921 and people start whispering that maybe he's not human. Some say he never studies, never calculates, just knows, like he's channeling something older. Maybe, just maybe, Vishnu's watching through him sipping cosmic tea. But the drama doesn't stop there. Enter Alexander Alekhine, a Russian, with a photographic memory, a volcanic temper, and the kind of eyebrows that start bar fights. Alekhine snatches the title from Capablanca and promptly refuses a rematch. Cue decades of chess world beef. Historians still argue whether Alekhine ducked Capablanca on purpose or simply grew too fond of being king. Either way, the feud becomes legend. You sidestep into a smoky cafe in Prague or Vienna, where cafe chess is a full-blown lifestyle. Think berets, espresso, and silent stare-downs. The game has moved from salons to the streets, and it's becoming a form of intellectual swagger. Then comes the Cold War. If chess had always flirted with politics, now it's in a full-on relationship. The Soviets declare chess a national priority. Why? Because they believe it proves the intellectual superiority of communism. Yes, seriously. The USSR builds chess schools, funds tournaments, and turns its grandmasters into propaganda tools. Children learn endgames before multiplication tables, and suddenly the World Chess Championship isn't just a title, it's a battlefield. Fringe fact. The Soviet Union even faked chess games for the sake of political optics. Some historians suspect certain draws were arranged in advance to maintain appearances. You drift into the 1960s where a different storm is brewing. In a quiet corner of Brooklyn, a teenager named Bobby Fischer is melting chess books with his brain. Fischer is brilliant, erratic, deeply American, and slightly unhinged. He hates draws, hates Soviets, and hates being misunderstood. His rise feels like a plot twist. The Soviets dominate chess for decades, then along comes this lone American who doesn't care about ideology, he just wants to destroy everyone. In 1972, Fischer faces Boris Spassky in Reykjavik, Iceland. The match is more than chess. It's capitalism versus communism, West versus East, ice versus fire. And it's weird. Fischer shows up late, makes bizarre demands, and nearly quits before the first move. But when he plays, it's electric. He dismantles Spassky with lines no one expects. In one game, he sacrifices a bishop so casually it makes Spassky blink twice and whisper to his chair. Fischer wins, America goes wild, and then Fischer vanishes. No press tour, no celebration, just silence. He drifts into reclusiveness, conspiracy theories, and occasional radio rants. It's as if the ghost of the old god Vishnu stepped out for one last play, then went back to sleep. Historians still argue whether Fischer's brilliance came from pure talent or obsessive training. Some say he memorized every game ever played. Others say he saw the board like a higher dimensional map. But one thing's clear, the 1972 match makes chess mainstream. Suddenly kids in Kansas are learning the Sicilian defense. Hollywood flirts with chess plots. Merch sales spike. The world has remembered the game. Meanwhile, the Soviets bounce back. Anatoly Karpov emerges a cold technician, unflappable and deeply Soviet. Then comes Garry Kasparov, fiery, intuitive, and defiant. The The two clash in the 1980s in a match that drags on for 48 games. 48. That's not a match, that's a hostage situation. Kasparov eventually wins and becomes a legend. His play is aggressive, layered, philosophical. He talks about chess like it's war poetry and math rolled into one. He also begins to see the future creeping in. Computers. Ah yes, the machines. Remember the Turk, the fake automaton. Now the machines are real and smart and terrifying. In 1997, IBM's Deep Blue defeats Kasparov in a 6-game match. It's a turning point. The crowd gasps. The future has arrived. Humanity has met its match, and it's silicon. You probably won't survive this metaphorical endgame either, but that's fine. You had a good run. From this moment forward, chess enters a new era. Online platforms rise. Engines dominate preparation. YouTube channels analyze games played between 12-year-olds with names like Dragon, Queen, Destroyer 88. And yet the core stays the same. Board, 64 squares, 2 armies, infinite stories. The old gods might have invented it to pass the time, but the world now plays to mark it. You exhale and suddenly you're surrounded by blue light and Wi-Fi signals. The scent of incense and vellum gives way to the sterile glow of LED screens and the faint hum of hard drives. Welcome to the present, where Vishnu might still be lounging, but now he's scrolling. Chess has entered the digital age, and with it comes a new level of chaos. Gone are the palaces and candlelit cafes. Now you sit across from your opponent through a screen. You might be in your pajamas, they might be in Uzbekistan, or a bot in Norway. Your mouse clicks, a pawn moves. Boom, you're part of a global tradition. The 21st century reinvents chess in every possible way. It becomes faster, louder, funnier, and strangely more spiritual. But don't worry, the paper bride hasn't risen yet. First up, online chess platforms. They explode in the early 2000s. Websites like chess.com and Lichess let anyone anywhere play anytime, on a train, in bed, at 3 a.m. after binge-watching conspiracy documentaries. The board is always open. You join tournaments without ever shaking a hand. You watch replays of grandmasters while eating cereal. It's democratized, digitized, and a little dystopian. And you know what else comes with it? Trash talk. Chat boxes, emojis, rage quits. It's beautiful. But here's the kicker. This chaotic, meme-laced version of chess actually brings more people into the game than ever before. In fact, during the COVID-19 lockdowns, chess has a renaissance. The Queen's Gambit hits Netflix, and suddenly people are buying boards, reading books, and asking, wait, do knights move in L shapes or what? Historians still argue whether the Queen's Gambit really caused a global spike in chess interest, or if it just coincided with everyone being stuck at home and running out of banana bread. Either way, it works. You see celebrities playing chess, athletes, influencers, Twitch streamers. A guy named Hikaru Nakamura becomes a legend not just for his speed, but for his weird, hilarious commentary. Chess is now entertainment. It's not just who will win. It's will Magnus Carlsen break the board with his mind or just calmly destroy you with 3 seconds left on the clock. Ah yes, Magnus. The Norwegian world champion appears like a mythological figure dipped in Patagonia fleece. Laid back, handsome, absurdly good at blitz. He wins everything. Rapid, classical, online, even fantasy football. If Vishnu played today, he'd probably stream under the alias M. Carlsen 694. But Magnus isn't just a player, he's also a sign of the times. He breaks with tradition, resigns from defending his world title because, in his words, I'm just not motivated. That's right, the GOAT leaves the throne because it's boring. Can you imagine that happening in a royal court? Yes, my liege, you've ruled wisely, but you've also declined 3 rematch offers and started playing pickleball instead. It's funny and weirdly modern. Alongside this, chess engines reach god-tier status. Stockfish, AlphaZero, and Leela, Chess Zero. These names aren't deities, but they kind of are. They see combinations no human can, moves that once looked like mistakes. Now they're divine. You learn that sacrificing a rook isn't crazy, it's genius. Fringe fact. AlphaZero taught itself chess from scratch in just 4 hours, then beat the strongest human-made engine. Historians and programmers are still freaking out about it. Even Vishnu, wherever he is, probably blinked. All of this floods into online culture. Meme pages pop up. YouTube videos dissect games frame by frame. TikToks compare chess openings to personality types. If you open with the Dutch defense, you're definitely emotionally unavailable. It's delightful, and yet something ancient remains. The game still starts with a quiet move, a pawn nudged forward. You imagine a young kid in Mumbai tapping out her first win against a stranger in Chile. Somewhere else, a father teaches his daughter on an old wooden board that smells like cardamom and coffee. And in a dusty corner of a temple, a monk still carves pieces from sandalwood. Because even in an age of algorithms, chess isn't just about competition, it's about rhythm, thought, presence. You sit, you move, you learn. It's still meditative, still symbolic, still ritual, just in HD. The spiritual aspect never leaves completely. Some modern players meditate before games. Others say they feel transported, like they're entering a different state of mind. The board becomes a sacred space, a battlefield, a dream map. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Vishnu didn't invent chess just to pass time, but to remind us what time is, how it passes, how it loops, how every time you reset the board, you're beginning again. Historians still debate whether chess's endurance comes from its design or its myth. But you feel the shape of something older in it, like a song you almost remember, like footsteps worn into ancient temple stone. From chaturanga to checkmate, the journey continues. You stretch, glance at the clock and realize it's nearly tomorrow. But one more game wouldn't hurt, would it? You crack your knuckles and reset the board in your mind, and now we rewind again, this time to where East meets West. Chess may have started in India, matured in Persia, and flourished in Islamic lands, but once it crosses into Europe, things get weird and, surprisingly, romantic. Picture it: dusty trade routes, crusader ships, bored monks. That's the pipeline. In medieval Europe, chess is no longer just a strategic pastime. It becomes a symbol of courtly love, moral lessons, and even class warfare. If you thought Vishnu made the game to pass divine time, the Europeans seem to use it as a metaphor for just about everything. You, of course, would not survive medieval hygiene standards, but you'd make a great spectator. By the 11th century, chess is making its rounds in Christian monasteries. Monks play it between writing scary sermons about sin. But by the 12th and 13th centuries, nobility takes over. The game becomes a fixture in aristocratic courts, equal parts mental exercise and social commentary. One quirk they really love: assigning moral roles to the pieces. There's this 13th century manuscript called the Libro de los Juegos, a Spanish text on games that turns the chessboard into a miniature kingdom. The king represents wisdom, the bishop symbolizes the church, the knight, he's obviously chivalry with legs, the pawn, a humble farmer, a salt of the earth everyman with delusions of grandeur. You can't help but smile. It's like a medieval Pixar pitch. Historians still argue whether these symbolic meanings were actually used during play or added by overexcited scribes. But they do show how chess had become more than a game. It was a map of society. And speaking of maps, let's talk love. Europe's version of chess slides into romantic territory like a suitor at a masquerade. In the courts of love, yes, that was a thing. Noblemen and ladies flirt over chessboards using moves as metaphors. If someone captures your queen, that could either be a compliment or an insult depending on how well you're doing. Paintings and poems from the 14th and 15th centuries show lovers staring longingly at each other across the board. You can imagine them whispering sweet nothings like, "My pawn yearns for your rook," or "Your knight leaps like my heart." It's dorky but kind of charming. A fringe tidbit. There's a medieval legend where a woman challenges her suitor to a game, promising to marry him only if he wins. He loses on purpose twice, just to prove he's worthy of her intellect. Historians still argue whether this ever happened, or if it was just a Renaissance way of saying she's not like other girls. But the game itself begins to change too. In the late 15th century, somewhere around 1475, something radical happens. The queen becomes the most powerful piece on the board. Before that, she was kind of a dud. She could only move one square diagonally. Not exactly inspiring. And suddenly she gets a makeover. The Mad Queen rule is born. She can move any number of squares in any direction like a rook and bishop combined on espresso. Scholars link this change to the rise of powerful queens in real life. Isabella of Castile, for one. This version of chess, often called Queen's chess or modern chess, spreads like wildfire. It's faster, flashier, a little brutal, the kind of chess where pieces die gloriously. The name for checkmate even changes across languages. In Arabic, it was Shah mat, the king is dead. In French, it becomes échec et mat. In English, just checkmate. A linguistic tombstone. And then the manuals begin. Europeans love writing treatises. By the 16th century, chess manuals become popular, detailing not just strategy, but also etiquette. Don't slam pieces, don't gloat. Don't flirt too hard while playing the bishop. You can't help but picture a monk writing "Thou shalt not simper upon castling." As the printing press gains traction, chess becomes one of the first games to get mass-market literature. You suddenly have celebrity players, masters, who tour Europe, play blindfolded, and issue open challenges in taverns. Chess goes public. But while Europe celebrates its new queen and faster tactics, the older traditions don't vanish. In fact, for a while, different regions have slightly different rules. Castling isn't standardized yet, neither is en passant. It's a bit like playing Uno in someone else's house. Wait, you don't stack draw fours. Historians still debate exactly when global chess rules crystallize, but by the 18th century, most people are on the same board, literally and figuratively. Still, the symbolic elements linger. In literature, chess appears as metaphor again and again. In Shakespeare, characters use chess to symbolize conflict and deception. In fairy tales, a well-played game might reveal someone's true character. In one story, a princess wins her freedom by checkmating a tyrant king. You realize that by now, chess has become something bigger than a pastime. It's a cultural mirror, a storytelling tool, a way to express strategy, fate, power, and even love. And you can't help but think somewhere Vishnu is watching all of this unfold like a Netflix miniseries, smiling, maybe even playing a few anonymous games under the username CosmicPorn69. You lean back and the candlelight flickers again, only now it's the glow from a medieval scribe's desk, painting a chessboard onto parchment. The game, you know, is coming together, piece by piece. And just when you think chess has stabilized into this sleek, metaphor-laden game of courtly intrigue and deadly queens, it takes another journey, this time toward the Enlightenment. You rub your temples, maybe squint a little, as Europe stretches its powdered limbs into the 17th and 18th centuries. This is the age of salons, telescopes, powdered wigs, and arguments over coffee that somehow last decades. And nestled amid this frothy swirl of intellectual ambition, chess. Still there. Still growing. Still causing mild existential crises. Chess becomes a gentleman's game, an emblem of reason, logic, and mental discipline. In the new rationalist Europe, winning at chess proves your moral fiber, your superior intellect, or at least your ability to avoid embarrassing blunders. It's no longer just courtly flirtation, it's Newton meets Knight. One historical fact: Benjamin Franklin, America's favorite bifocal-wearing polymath, was a chess lover. He even wrote an essay called The Morals of Chess, which argued that the game teaches foresight, circumspection, and caution. You imagine Franklin hunched over a board in candlelight, half-naked under a linen sheet, pausing every 5 minutes to chase a lightning bolt or flirt with a French diplomat. Probably both. Back in Europe, chess clubs begin popping up, especially in places like London, Paris, and Vienna. These aren't just game rooms, they're smoky arenas of social performance. Gentlemen compete in silence, nod approvingly, and sip terrible wine from silver goblets. Sometimes wagers are made, sometimes reputations hang in the balance, and there's also a growing hunger for systematization. Players begin cataloging openings, naming them, classifying positions like rare butterflies, the King's Gambit, the Ruy Lopez, the Sicilian defense. Sounds more like cocktails than strategy, but don't be fooled, they're deadly serious. Fringe tidbit time. In 1769, an Austrian inventor named Wolfgang von Kempelen presents the world with the Mechanical Turk, an automaton chess machine that supposedly plays perfect chess on its own. It's a wooden mannequin dressed in Turkish robes, seated behind a cabinet with a board on top. People marvel, they whisper. Some assume the future has arrived, but plot twist, it's fake. A small human chess master is secretly hidden inside the cabinet operating levers and pulleys like some Enlightenment-era Wizard of Oz. The Turk tours Europe, defeats Napoleon, and wins over royals before finally being exposed. Historians still argue whether it was an elaborate fraud or an early prototype of human-machine partnership. Either way, it spooks everyone. The broader effect, people start associating chess with mechanical intelligence. Not just human cunning anymore, but something colder, more calculating. Machines might one day surpass us at our own sacred pastime. Spoiler, they do. But in this era, chess is still a game of letters. Manuscripts and treatises grow fatter. The language around chess becomes almost scientific. Diagrams, notations, and annotated games flood the intellectual market. Players begin studying the game like philosophy. Each move a syllogism, each blunder a sin. One French noble even suggests that chess should be taught in schools alongside Latin and fencing. Imagine a schoolmaster saying, "Today we conjugate parry and castle." And speaking of castling, the rules finally settle down. Castling becomes standardized king and rook, swapping spots in a cozy little maneuver of mutual protection. En passant also gets the green light. Even stalemates are finally treated as draws instead of tragic silent implosions. Historians still argue over whether this homogenization killed some regional charm, but most agree it made tournaments easier to referee. Which brings us to professional chess. Yes, it's a thing now. By the early 19th century, you start seeing true celebrity players, people who tour, challenge each other, and keep rigorous game records. One of the first greats, François-André Danican Philidor, a Frenchman who claimed that pawns are the soul of chess. He plays blindfolded multiple games at once and wins. People are shook. But here's the twist. All this cerebral seriousness doesn't kill the romance of the game. Not entirely. In salons and parlors across Europe, chess still carries that old perfume of drama and subtle seduction. Novels begin, including it, as a backdrop. Characters fall in love, betray each other, and occasionally murder, usually not over the game, but, adjacent to it. And if you zoom out just a little, you notice something, a pattern, like the lines of a chessboard itself. Chess has survived religion war, empire colonialism, and printing presses. It's shape-shifted across cultures, genders, and ideologies. In Enlightenment Europe, it finds a niche as the perfect allegory, a test of man's ability to dominate chaos through reason. If Vishnu once played it to pass eternal time, these powdered philosophers now play it to assert human brilliance. You exhale watching candlelight dance across the imagined squares. The pieces sit frozen in mid-game like statues in a museum after hours. There's still more to come. Machines, Cold War tensions, viral matches. But here in this Enlightenment snapshot, you get the sense that chess is no longer just a pastime. It's become a mirror. One we all peer into, hoping to see genius staring back. So here you are, somewhere in the 19th century, drifting through candlelit libraries and chess clubs, smelling faintly of tobacco ambition and powdered egos, and suddenly you feel the shift, that cold draft sweeping in. It's not the weather, it's the dawn of modernity. Chess is about to go global, industrial, and just a little bit nationalist. You shuffle forward to the mid-1800s. Steam engines roar, revolutions ignite, top hats are alarmingly tall, and nations begin flexing like awkward teenagers in a locker room. And in the midst of it all, yes, chess again. But now it's not just intellectual pastime or parlor flirtation, it's a contest of prestige. Cue the London 1851 tournament, often called the first official international chess tournament. Held during the Great Exhibition, this event smacks of Victorian pride and progress. It's like the Met Gala of pawns and bishops, except with more waistcoats and less glitter. Here, the legendary Adolf Anderssen of Germany stuns the crowd with a match that becomes folklore, the immortal game. Mainstream fact. The immortal game features daring sacrifices, queen rooks, everything culminating in a delicate, devastating checkmate. Anderssen essentially throws his kitchen sink across the board and still wins. It's bold, beautiful, and makes every armchair strategist gasp into their monocle. The tournament sets a precedent. From here on out, chess isn't just a symbol of gentlemanly thought. It's a sport, a gladiator's arena, a global language of dominance, intellectual warfare in 64 squares. Now, the idea of the world champion emerges, and of course, as soon as there's a title, there's drama. Players squabble over formats. Rules are hammered out with all the passion of a 19th century opera duel. And in 1886, the first recognized world championship match takes place between Wilhelm Steinitz and Johannes Zukertort. Here's a quirky tidbit. Steinitz, the eventual winner, claimed to have developed a scientific theory of chess, emphasizing positional play over flashy tactics. Later in life, he also claimed to be able to communicate with God via telephone. So you know two kinds of vision. Historians still argue whether Steinitz was a misunderstood genius or just lucky to get in before the game became even more brutal. Either way, he helped redefine the game, less about romantic sacrifices, more about long-term positional grind, the chess equivalent of eat your vegetables. And yet chess remains gloriously theatrical. Players showboat. Rivalries form. Fans argue in smoky cafes over whether a bishop should have moved 3 turns earlier. Chess magazines bloom like springtime weeds. Notations fly through the mail like love letters or mild threats. Meanwhile, in Russia, the chess fire is catching. There's something about the blend of icy logic and poetic calculation that seduces the Russian soul. The game becomes embedded in Soviet intellectual life, but that's for a bit later. Right now, it's growing slowly like tea, steeping in a cracked porcelain cup. Fringe detail. In the late 1800s, some spiritualists claimed chess could be used to contact the dead. They argued that spirits preferred structured systems, and the chessboard made a perfect communication grid. This idea didn't catch on, possibly because ghosts make terrible opponents and refuse to resign. You pull your robe tighter as the century nears its end. The industrial age churns forward, and with it comes mass literacy printed chess books and telegraph matches. Yes, telegraph. People literally send chess moves over wire across cities or even countries, turning a single game into a month-long correspondence romance. A curious thought flickers across your mind. What would Vishnu make of all this? His little board game, if it was his now sprawled across continents, tangled in empires and egos, its pieces whispering in code through cables and ink. You imagine the gods smirking, lounging on a cloud, watching mortals panic over pawn structures and minor imbalances. It's also the age of the chess cafe. In Paris, Berlin, Vienna, you name it, intellectuals gather in dim corners, coffee-stained and wide-eyed, hashing out tactics like mad scientists. One eye on the board, one on the rival across the room, and one, just one, on the rising smoke of something deeper. The knowledge that this game, and it's more than a game, and right on schedule, technology begins to nibble at the edges. Mechanical clocks are introduced to keep players honest. Gone are the days of long brooding silences and bathroom breaks to think. Now the clock ticks loud and fast like a heartbeat. Chess becomes faster, more aggressive. Pressure builds and tempers flare. One notorious match ends when a player slaps the board, scattering pieces, then storms out shouting, "Only of a coward plays the French defense." An understandable reaction, really. Historians still debate whether this mechanization improved chess or sapped its soul. Was it purer when players wandered into moves like dreamers, or is there beauty in discipline, in a metronomic mind ticking alongside the clock? Either way, by the turn of the 20th century, chess stands as both sport and spectacle. Players are no longer just nobles or monks, they're engineers, school teachers, poets, even anarchists. A living proof that strategy belongs to everyone. And still, those 64 squares contain infinite possibilities. Every match begins the same way, and yet no two games are truly alike. Each move is a choice, each piece a potential story. and every player, knowingly or not, steps into the same ancient dance. Vishnu may have begun sifting time through a board of light and shadow. You glance down at your imaginary board now. A rook gleams, a pawn trembles, a queen waits patient. We're not done yet. The world's about to go to war, and chess, it goes with it. The pieces are still set, but the world around them is about to crumble. You can feel it now, an eerie, heavy silence settling across the board. The early 20th century isn't here to play. It's here to rupture, to rage, to reorder everything, even chess. You step into the 1910s and immediately feel the tremor of World War I rumbling underfoot. Empires clash, trenches scar the earth, and the romanticism of old-world intellect is replaced by industrial slaughter. Amid the chaos, chess becomes something quieter, a kind of solace for soldiers, a distraction for prisoners, a thread of logic in a world unraveling. In makeshift barracks and chilly Red Cross tents, men carve pieces from scraps of wood. Moves are played on torn maps or in the dirt with rifle butts. In POW camps, chess tournaments are organized, not for glory, just to stay sane. One British officer describes a game played during an artillery bombardment. I held the knight mid-air for a moment as the roof shook, then placed it with care as though it mattered. Mainstream fact: José Raúl Capablanca, a suave Cuban-born genius, dominates the post-war chess scene. Fluent in French, Spanish, and checkmate, Capablanca becomes the third official world chess champion in 1921. His style, effortless, smooth, a kind of liquid logic. Observers say he rarely seems to think, just flows. Quirky detail. Capablanca also believed chess was becoming too predictable. He proposed a new version of the game, adding extra pieces and expanding the board to keep it fresh. It flopped, but still, you have to admire the gall. Reinventing chess because you're bored of winning, bold move. You arrive now in the 1930s, the air tense again. Dictators rise, economies collapse, and ideologies start staring each other down like two queens on a collision course. And in Soviet Russia, chess becomes something entirely new, a national obsession. Stalin doesn't just tolerate chess, he weaponizes it. The game is used as propaganda, a symbol of Soviet intellectual dominance. Schools begin teaching chess to children alongside arithmetic and patriotism. Chess clubs sprout like mushrooms across the USSR, funded, structured, and scouted like sports leagues. Historians still argue whether Soviet chess dominance was purely cultural or strategically engineered by the state. Either way, it works. Soviet players begin demolishing the global scene, their styles honed in dense training camps, their minds sharper than razors. Here comes Mikhail Botvinnik, the Soviet chess colossus. He's methodical, serious, practically part machine. Under his reign, Soviet chess reaches new heights, and the title of world champion becomes not just personal, but political. Fringe fact: Botvinnik, while reigning as champ, also worked on early computer programming. He once claimed that machines could someday mimic human intuition on the board. He wasn't wrong, but we're not there just yet. Back in the West, chess feels less industrial, more artistic. Ruben Fine in America, Max Euwe in the Netherlands, and Salo Floor of Czechoslovakia are all rising stars, but they play with less state support, often juggling jobs and travel hurdles. While the Soviets play on marble tables, some of these men play on creaky boards in hotel lobbies. Then, as you probably guessed, it all comes crashing again. World War II slams across the globe like a pawn-turned tyrant. Tournaments are cancelled, players disappear, some to fight, some to hide. Others never return. But the game survives, somehow always it survives. In 1948, after the war's dust settles, a unique championship is held to fill the vacuum left by the death of reigning champion Alexander Alekhine, who, by the way, died with a chessboard beside his bed. Now that's commitment. The post-war era begins with the Soviet chess machine roaring to life. It's not just Botvinnik anymore, it's an army. Tal, Petrosian, Smyslov, Karpov. Each one a legend. Each one backed by coaches, analysts, and a government ready to use their victories as proof of ideological superiority. Meanwhile, the Cold War begins to simmer, and chess finds itself on the front lines, just quieter. The board becomes a symbolic battlefield. East versus West, pawn versus pawn. And into this swirling tension walks Bobby Fischer. Ah, yes, the American wunderkind, brash, brilliant, and unhinged in equal measure. Fischer learns Russian just to read Soviet chess books. He wins the US championship at 14. At 15, he becomes the youngest grandmaster in history. He's a comet with a ticking clock. Quirky tidbit: Fischer once accused his opponent of using hypnotism during a match. Another time, he demanded that all cameras be removed because their vibrations disrupted his concentration. You can't make this up. By the late 1960s, you can feel it building. The match of the century is on the horizon, Fischer versus the Soviets. But that drama deserves its own section. For now, step back. Look at where you've come. From temples and avatars to bunkers and revolutions, chess has followed humanity's every rise and fall. Through fire and famine, it remained evolving, morphing, but never breaking. And still it waits. The next move, the next challenger, the next myth. The air is still. The board gleams under a single bulb. The pieces do not blink. Now the board is perfectly balanced on the edge of a Cold War knife. It's 1972. You sit cross-legged on the shag carpet of some retro hotel room TV buzzing with static. The whole world is watching a chessboard, which honestly is a sentence that will never make sense again. But here it is, Reykjavik, Iceland, a sleepy northern city with a name like a cough. And in its quiet halls, the most famous chess match of the century begins. Bobby Fischer versus Boris Spassky. East versus West. Not a bullet fired, not a tank rolled, but the tension, oh, it could break bones. Fischer, remember, is that wiry, antisocial American with eyes like trapdoors. Genius with a taste for paranoia. Spassky, a charming Soviet gentleman. Calm, strategic, a player with grace. But he's carrying more than just his title. He's carrying the weight of an entire ideology. And Fischer, he nearly doesn't show up. Seriously, he demands a bigger prize fund, complains about the cameras, the lighting, the chairs, the whispers of ghost spies in the walls. Kissinger himself calls him, "The world wants you to play Bobby." And somehow it works. He shows. Mainstream fact Game 6 of the match becomes legendary. Even Spassky applauds at the end, a thing unheard of. Fischer's style in that game is described as beautiful, by grandmasters, an odd word in a war of minds. But it fits. He transforms the board into ballet. Brutal ballet. Quirky moment. During the match, the Soviets are so suspicious of Fischer's demands to remove cameras that they inspect the venue for hidden devices. What do they find? A dead fly inside a light fixture. That's it. The fly is removed. The Cold War continues. And just like that, the impossible happens. Fischer wins. America, land of burgers and football, claims the World Chess Championship. For a moment, chess becomes cool. Teenagers pick up rooks instead of drumsticks. Cafes host rapid-fire tournaments. But like all flames fed by madness, it can't last. 'Cause Fischer, he disappears. He refuses to defend his title, vanishes into the fog of conspiracy theories, lawsuits, and wild interviews. In his absence, the Soviets retake the throne. Anatoly Karpov becomes champion by default in 1975, and the Soviet reign resumes icy and absolute. Historians still argue whether Fischer's descent was preventable or inevitable. Some say his mind was cracked by genius. Others blame a lack of support or mental health awareness. One thing's clear: he was the comet, bright, brief, and unforgettable. The 1980s bring another Soviet giant, Garry Kasparov, brash, analytical, and terrifyingly efficient. Kasparov's mind is a steel trap. He's younger, faster, more aggressive than Karpov. Their rivalry becomes a saga. Think Ali versus Frazier, but with bishops. They play 5 world championship matches across the decade. 5. The first is so long it's abandoned after 5 months. Yes, months. Imagine playing someone for 48 games and still not finishing. Kasparov finally takes the title in 1985 and holds it for 15 years. He becomes the symbol of modern chess. Commercial, political, electric. And while he's dominating the board, something else is stirring in the background. Enter the machines. You can almost hear the humming of early CPUs, big beige boxes, blinking lights. Developers begin feeding chess rules into computers, teaching them to think, not just move. At first it's laughable. The programs blunder, freeze or lose to 12-year-olds. But then they start winning. IBM creates Deep Blue, a machine built to play Kasparov. In 1996 he beats it, just barely. He smirks. Humans still rule. Then comes 1997. Deep Blue 2.0, a rematch, and this time the machine wins. The world changes. Kasparov storms off. The press explodes. Did we just see the dawn of artificial superiority? Historians still argue whether Deep Blue's victory was truly intelligent play or brute force calculation. But you, sitting in the quiet hush of digital progress, feel the shift. The machine has made its move. Meanwhile, chess doesn't die, it democratizes. The internet explodes. Suddenly you don't need a smoky cafe or Soviet funding to play. You need a laptop and a decent Wi-Fi signal. Platforms like chess.com and Lichess pop up. Twitch streamers make chess oddly fun. And in a world of avatars and usernames, a Norwegian teen named Magnus Carlsen starts beating everybody. He looks like he should be on a surfboard, not sitting across from grandmasters. But Carlsen's gift is psychological. He plays like a coiled spring, a predator waiting. His endgame's disgustingly precise. He becomes world champion in 2013 and holds the title for a decade. He models, he memes, he brings swagger to a 1,500-year-old game. In a very un-Vishnu twist, he even declines to defend his title in 2023, just steps away. Quirky note: Carlsen once beat Bill Gates in 9 seconds. That's not chess, that's sorcery. By now, AI doesn't just beat humans, it teaches them. Engines like Stockfish and AlphaZero find moves never dreamed of by human minds, not because they're illegal, but because they're weird, beautifully weird. Which brings us to now. You sit at a glowing screen, maybe you play, maybe you just watch, but behind every click, every pawn push is a cascade of history, gods, emperors, prisoners, computers, a lineage unbroken, a game never finished. And so you wonder, did Vishnu invent chess to pass the time? Or did chess invent Vishnu to explain how time passes? You lean back now, the pieces all scattered in your mind like a once neat board upended by a gust of wind. And that brings you to the part of this story that no one agrees on: the symbolism, the deeper meaning beneath the rooks and ranks, the soul behind the strategy. See, if chess is truly a mirror of life, then each piece reflects a part of us. The king, slow, fragile and essential. The queen, powerful, graceful, unstoppable when allowed to move freely. The pawns, numerous, humble, with surprising potential. And the knights, weird little tricksters moving in L shapes like chaos disguised as order. You start to see why this game has enchanted empires. In Hindu mythology, time isn't linear. It's cyclical, endless rounds of birth, destruction and rebirth. Vishnu, the preserver god, is said to descend into the world whenever the cosmic balance tips. Sometimes as a prince, sometimes a fish, sometimes a man-lion hybrid, sometimes just maybe as a game. What if chess is one of those descents, a divine avatar meant to teach patience, foresight, detachment? You win by thinking ahead, but you always lose someone along the way. Sound familiar? Historians still argue whether the original chaturanga was designed as a didactic tool, a spiritual metaphor disguised as amusement, or just a military drill with fancier packaging. Some texts describe it as a training ground for the soul. Others say it was just a board game that got lucky. But pause, because there's one more weird twist in this god game tangle. In some old Puranic legends, Vishnu isn't just a god who plays chess, he's a piece on the board. In a tale from the Bhagavata Purana, Krishna, an avatar of Vishnu, literally plays dice with his cousin Yudhishthira, losing everything in a single fated gamble. Kingdom, brothers, dignity. It leads to exile, war, and the grand moral epic of the Mahabharata. So here's the wild question: what if Vishnu didn't invent chess just to pass time, but to test humans with it? Quirky theories have emerged from that idea. In some folk temples, players leave offerings at shrines before matches, not out of superstition but respect. They treat chessboards like altars, pieces like miniature gods. And when the British carried chess back to their parlours and parliament rooms, they had no idea they were playing on sacred ground. Colonial officers chuckled over tea, pushing carved ivory pieces across imported boards, never realizing they were reenacting cosmic wars, battles older than empires, moves older than maps. But back in India, chess never really left the spiritual. In certain Jain temples, monks carve entire chess sets out of crystal. In small villages, old men still sit under neem trees with clay pawns muttering mantras between moves, not because they want to win, but because for them playing is part of being. And you wonder what you've been doing all this time? Just watching or taking part? Because every move we make is a gamble, every choice a sacrifice, and like in chess, sometimes you only understand the importance of a piece once it's gone. So maybe that's what Vishnu was teaching, that life like the board is finite, but the patterns, the stories they go on. You remember how the game ends. The king is cornered, the queen's been lost, your knights lie fallen. But even then, even in defeat, there's something elegant about it, something eternal, which leads us to a final mystery, a real one this time. In 2002, during the renovation of a small shrine in Tamil Nadu, workers uncovered a stone chessboard carved directly into the temple floor. No one knew it was there. It wasn't mentioned in any record. But the board wasn't ordinary. It had 64 squares, yes, but each was engraved with a Sanskrit couplet. Together they formed a poem, a riddle. Roughly translated, it said, "Each square a world, each pawn a fate, a game begun but never late. The God who moves unseen, unknown, sits always quietly alone." Historians still argue whether the inscription was devotional poetic or just cryptic. But you feel the message in your bones. Maybe the gods don't invent games to pass time. Maybe they invent time so we have room to play. By now your mind is drifting across temple floors, across boards etched in stone and crystal, and into the homes of people, long gone people who played chess, not for fun but for meaning. Maybe that's the real story here. Chess didn't travel across continents like a relic packed in a diplomat's trunk. It migrated like an idea, shapeless and persistent. You picture a caravan in the Thar Desert where an old merchant unwraps a linen cloth and reveals a wooden set with worn edges. Somewhere else in a Mughal court, two men in saffron and teal silk sit cross-legged on velvet, eyes locked, saying nothing. Only hands move, only the board matters, the rest of the world waits. And now it's your uncle and your cousin at a park bench on a windy afternoon. It's your phone lighting up with a challenge from someone in Prague. It's a dusty book in your school library with a fold-out diagram of the Queen's Gambit. Vishnu's game lives everywhere, it seems. But it's not just about the board anymore. The story starts showing up in places you don't expect, like in the 7th century carvings at Mahabalipuram, where some scholars believe a figure in repose is surrounded by a grid-like pattern suspiciously reminiscent of a chessboard, or in the verses of the Tamil epic Silapatikaram, which some interpret as metaphors for cosmic gameplay. Historians still argue whether those carvings were meant to depict literal chess or just symbolic grids. But even the uncertainty has power. Chess is a vessel. You pour meaning into it like tea into a cracked cup. It holds more than it should. Then there are the tales that defy easy categories, like the legend of the mystic Rajasthani prince who refused to fight in a real war until he had defeated his enemy in a game of chess. Or the eerie myth from Bengal about a cursed board that changed its players' fortunes with every match win or lose. Folklore, probably. But tell that to the villager who never played again, and maybe you don't believe in cursed pawns or magical gambits. Fair. But even in the modern world, chess still brings something strange into the room. Look at the silence it creates. Two people sit down, and suddenly everything goes still. The clock ticks, eyes narrow, futures unfold in secret. It's not loud like a sport. It's not passive like a movie. It's ritual, pure and quiet. And if that sounds religious, well, it kind of is. You begin to think of Vishnu again, not as a god thundering from the heavens, but as a quiet figure in the corner of the room watching your game. He doesn't cheer, he doesn't judge, he just watches the board. There's something oddly comforting about that. Because if you mess up, you reset the pieces, you try again and again and again.
Maybe that's the secret hiding inside this ancient game. It's not about winning, it's about trying, about staying in the match, even when you're down a bishop and your pawns look like sheep headed to the slaughter.
You shift in bed slightly, noticing how your breathing has slowed, and somewhere in the folds of your thoughts you recall one final theory. Some fringe historians, not many but a few, claim that the original chessboard wasn't meant to be flat. It was domed, slightly curved to mirror the celestial sphere, the heavens mapped out in ivory and teak. Players weren't strategists, they were stargazers. Is that true? No one knows. But imagine playing chess on a curved board under an open sky, the moonlight catching the polished pieces and the universe moving slowly above you. Every move you make echoed in the stars. Checkmate as cosmic alignment. And maybe in that moment Vishnu smiles. Not because you won, but because you remembered that it was never about victory. It was always about balance.
A game of symmetry, a game of perspective, a game where even gods take turns.
You're lying there now and everything's gone quiet except the soft hum of memory, imagination, and the whirring thoughts this whole tale has summoned. The board is nearly full. So let's step back for a moment, look down at it like the gods might. Your king's in a corner, your pawns have either fallen or made it across. There's a single knight left leaning, the rooks are posted like sentries, but time's ticking down. And yet even here, even in this imagined endgame, something stirs. Let's talk for a moment about Vishnu's avatars again. Remember the 10 forms: fish, tortoise boar, man lion, dwarf, warrior, prince Buddha, and one yet to come. Now try fitting them, however abstractly, into the logic of chess. The fish swims diagonally like a bishop, unexpected and fluid. The tortoise guards like a rook, stubborn, deliberate, squared off. The man lion leaps like a knight, unpredictable and divine. The warrior charges like a queen, powerful and direct. The dwarf, like a humble pawn, steps slowly forward yet contains infinite potential. You can play this game forever, finding new mappings, fresh metaphors. You can redraw the board each night and still discover a new story in the morning. And that maybe is why the game has lasted, why it moved across deserts and mountains, seas and empires, why it sits today on apps and coffee tables and live streams, why monks and AI and toddlers all want a turn. Historians still debate whether chess was meant to teach war fate or spiritual balance, but none of them deny its persistence, its power, its eerie familiarity. Like it came from somewhere deep, deeper than strategy, deeper than even mythology. Maybe that's why people once believed a god dreamed it up. Not just because they needed an origin myth, but because it feels like something only a god would understand in full. And maybe Vishnu, infinite sleeper, did indeed roll over one day and ask, what if I made something balanced? And he reached into the dream and carved a board, set the pieces, created rules that echoed the cycle of time: birth, life, action, death, transformation. Maybe the point wasn't to keep the gods entertained. Maybe the point was to teach you to wait, to think, to consider all the pieces, not just the flashy ones, and to try even when you're cornered. So here we are, back where we began. A god on a cloud, a board between you and a question hanging in the air. Your move. And now you've made it to the end of the board. The lights are low, the room is still. You feel the soft pressure of blanket, the rhythm of breath, the whisper of stories curling like smoke in the dark. You've walked across ancient palaces and desert tents, watched gods play, and sages ponder, kings hesitate, and pawns dream. You've followed a game older than memory, and maybe, just maybe, it's followed you back. Close your eyes now. Imagine a board not made of wood or marble, but starlight and air. The pieces glow faintly, each holding a memory, a lesson, a quiet echo of some long-lost move. You sit across from no one, or perhaps someone divine. No need to rush. The next move will still be there in the morning. Let your muscles melt. Let the sky above your mind darken. Let the hush of the ancient world press gently at your ears. Whatever waits tomorrow, whatever pieces scatter or align tonight, you've played the oldest game. And in your dreams, may you find every check has its balance, every gambit its grace. Thanks for listening. Sleep well.